Meghan Markle's lefty politics aren't exactly a secret, and with Californian Senator Dianne Feinstein passing away on Friday, fears are beginning to grow that Princess Pinocchio may have her sights set on her seat in the Senate. I'm joined now by editor of Majesty Magazine, Ingrid Seward. Ingrid, I know that we've talked before. Welcome, by the way, to the brand new spanking world of the independent Republican Mike Graham. We've got sort of turbocharged everything here, so I'm very pleased that you can be on the first show. We've talked a lot before, haven't we, about Meghan Markle's political ambitions. I would have thought that after the sort of last few months that she's had, she might think that people aren't taking her quite as seriously as perhaps they might have done even a year ago. Is she actually really keen on this, do you think?
Well, I think she must be. I know there's been all kinds of rumours, and I always thought, there's no way that Meghan would consider trying to run for the White House. But we're talking about California, we're not talking about Westminster. And I think because of the death of one of the senators, Dianne Feinstein, who was 90, for some reason, which I'm not really completely au fait with, Mike, but you might be, they want, in her place, they want a woman of colour.
Yeah.
And I think that's when Meghan's name came up. And apparently, that there's been a lot of support for this. But whether that support comes politically or just from Meghan's fan base, I don't know. I think it is. But I wouldn't put it past her to have political ambitions.
No, I wouldn't either, because she obviously sees herself as no end of a sort of, guru of all manner of things, including self-help, charity, all manner of projects that she's involved in. I saw this week that they're getting involved now with the Archibald Foundation with some schools in Nigeria. She's doing good all over the world. She turns up at Invictus Games. But yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I know about California, which is that it is the wokest state in America, being run by a guy who is a Democrat called Gavin Newsom. And San Francisco has become a kind of, ludicrously badly run city where shoplifters don't get prosecuted if they lift anything less than $1,000, where the streets are filled with people on weird drugs just staggering about. And so I could absolutely believe that the Democrat machine would say, we would like to have a woman of colour. And maybe they don't have very many interesting faces. And I guess, she might just fit that bill. But, I mean, the trouble is, when you see some of the things that she says, they have literally no substance to them. She talks about people being kind to one another, and she talks about people being nice to one another, all of which is fine, but not exactly a political mind, I don't think she's got.
Well, no, I don't think she does seem to have a political mind, whatever a political mind might be. But this is, Ronald Reagan was voted, a senator of California, and then he became president. And he was an actor and continued to be an actor, I think, throughout his entire presidency. Yeah. Because, he kind of did what he was told, and he was very successful. But I don't see that. He had a lot of humility, which I don't see in Meghan Markle. No. Oh, I beg your pardon, the Duchess of Sussex. I don't see that kind of humility that appeals to so many people.
No, exactly right. Also, I mean, people have got to like her enough to vote for her. I mean, the thing about Ronald Reagan was that he became president of the United States of America via becoming governor of California first. And then, before that, he had become, I think, the head of the Screen Actors Guild, the union. So he'd kind of gone from being an actor to a union chief to a governor of the state to the White House. So, she hasn't really done any of that. She's just an actress. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger became the governor of California as well. And I suppose you might have maybe not thought that was very likely to happen either. But, I mean, what would happen, do you think, to her world if she became the single sort of earning person, I suppose, if you like? What would Harry do then if she had to spend loads of time in Washington? He'd be helpless without her, wouldn't he?
Well, the thing is, what we haven't heard Meghan's view on this, and obviously she's not going to say anything because she's very savvy. She's not going to say a word. But we don't know if this has any foundation. But I think yes, eventually she probably would have to move to Washington, but that would be way in the future. I think that it would leave Harry free to do more things without her, which is what he seems to be doing. But you're absolutely right. I feel that he very much needs Meghan at his side. I think he appears, and I might be wrong, but it's my opinion, he appears to be the needier of the two.
Oh, I think so. No doubt about that. Just before we go on, Ingrid, I've got a bit of breaking news, and terrible, tragic breaking news again. Yet another boy has been stabbed to death outside a home in North London. A 16-year-old boy, we're told, suffered an attack in Kendall Gardens in Edmonton in North London. Officers attended, but along with paramedics, but unfortunately he was pronounced dead at the scene. He is now the 17th teenager to be killed in London since the start of 2023. Only last week it was Eliane Andam, of course, the 15-year-old who was stabbed to death after a chase off a bus. I mean, just horrendous. Really, really awful news. Breaking news, a 16-year-old boy in Edmonton knifed to death outside a home. A murder probe has been launched. So we'll bring you up to date with anything on that story as it happens, and I'm sure it will develop throughout the course of the afternoon. We're talking to Ingrid Seward. Ingrid, I just wanted to ask you about an extraordinary story in The Sun this morning about the royals being targeted by Russia. It says Russia's revenge in the inside pages. Hackers from the former Soviet Union apparently targeting the royals because of their support for Ukraine. It's a bit worrying.
Well, I think what they attacked, didn't they? Hack down the royal website.
Yes, so they did. It was down for something like 90 minutes yesterday morning. Well,
I have to say that the royal website used to be wonderful, but I don't think it's quite as good as it used to, because it's a little bit out of date all the time. So maybe it's a good thing that it came down to be cleared up. But it is very strange, and it is quite scary, that story. I mean, if the Russians are actually attacked, well, I suppose their easiest way in is through technology, and that is so hack something really high profile and get the publicity.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, if they can target something as close to the royal family as the royal family's own website, I know that these things are managed probably by outside companies or whatever, but it's been targeted by something called Killnet, which is apparently famous as a hacking organisation which tries to get into and disrupt any country and any kind of country's government that supports Ukraine, which is pretty much every country in the world, I suppose you would say. But basically, apparently, if you went on that website yesterday, you would get a message that said, gateway timeout error, sort code 504. But I guess it shows you that there are, bad actors out there, for want of a better phrase, who would wish harm upon members of the royal family.
I personally think it's more about getting the publicity more than harm on members of the royal family. That's their underlying reason. But I think it's because they know that this will get them and their website or whatever it is that they are acting from, it will get them immense publicity by targeting the royals. That's what people do that climb over the railings at Buckingham Palace, to make a point about something they need to talk about. It gets them publicity. I think it's more that than targeting the royals, because, as you said, the website is hosted from somewhere that is not exactly in Buckingham Palace. I'm sure of that.
No, that's absolutely right. But it does prove, I suppose, that, none of this is easy. That you and I, I'm sorry to say this publicly, I'm old enough to remember when the internet didn't exist and when actual, phone calls had to be made to people in the press offices of Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace to get information. Nothing was sort of published, really, apart from the occasional, message on the gates of one of the buildings. And so, the modern royal family has to deal with all of this, who runs their Twitter account, hiring the right people so that, somebody doesn't go nuts and decide to put a load of old nonsense on their Instagram accounts. It's quite a complicated sort of social media business now, isn't it?
It is, and they're quite far ahead with their technology. I mean, I'm afraid, Mike, like you, I do remember not having the internet and social media, and I also remember when Buckingham Palace were the first people to use fax machines.
Yeah, were they?
And they were very proud of that.
How funny.
Yes, I
that
remember
really is
that
extraordinary.
really clearly.
I've got a slightly tongue-in-cheek tweet here from Chris in Newbury. He says, Mike, read these two sentences out loud and see which ones sound the most improbable and ridiculous. Meghan Markle for President of the United States of America, or Grant Shapps for Defence Secretary of the United Kingdom. And then he says, Harry will make a great First Lady, which is a bit harsh.
That's a bit harsh.
Yeah.
That's a bit harsh.
Well, do you know, the funny
we,
thing actually about the American political scene is that while they've had very many famous, you know, speakers of the House and leaders of the House and all of that, they've never actually had a female president nomination. They've never had one.
I know.
You know, they've had a couple of. They've now got a female vice president, but they've never had a woman actually running for president.
No, that is interesting. But they always, you know, they put their first lady on almost the same kind of pedestal as the president. Sometimes they prefer the first lady, but I think it's such a big country made up of so many different parts that you're right. Everybody's got to really. We're talking about the president here, not Meghan
Yes.
being a governor of California. Everyone really has to be right behind that. And I think it's a very, very long shot. And it may be something that she simply isn't interested in. We don't know. And I don't think we'll get any comment from that quarter.
Yeah, absolutely right. Ingrid, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
Ingrid
you.
Seward there, editor of Majesty Magazine, with